This is Dr. X key score, with the program. This is video 10, and the title of this video is Surveillance Technology Deployment Curves. And what I'd like to discuss in this video is the tendency of the powers that be in the federal government to withhold the majority of the technology which has been discovered. And I guess the greatest person, or the most well-known person, would of course be Tesla, and everyone assumes or thinks, including myself, that his technology has been developed but is most likely being withheld from the population. Well, this is what I refer to as a surveillance technology deployment curve. And I coined this phrase to describe the lag time between the actual deployment of technology and the subsequent intentional disinformative release of news of that technology, especially in regards to deep state and surveillance. So when they're releasing information that's referencing, pending legislation would allow Agency Z to deploy technology R in certain situations, believe you me, it's already been deployed across the board by said agency, and most likely sister agencies, without the public's knowledge, for many, many years, if not decades. When there's a recent news release which states, researchers are now working on thought translation via a brain-to-computer interface network. Let's be rest assured that the Fortune 20 companies, in conjunction with the deep state, and in some cases they are synonymous, they developed and deployed the technology decades ago. I'm going to cite some examples of that for you guys. Well, one of them is, there's a September, I think it was a 2015 article in the Daily Mail, UK Daily Mail, which referenced a system called BrainGate. And within that system, physically implanted sensors were used to translate brain signals via the brain-to-computer interface I just referenced a moment ago. Well, this report details the research was currently being done at Brown University. So that in turn would lead us to believe that the system is still in the most rudimentary of stages, and that it would most likely necessitate physical implants. But what the researchers at Brown University aren't stating is that in 1974, I think it was July or August, there was an individual whose name was Robert G. Malik. And Malik successfully tested and patented an apparatus and method for remotely monitoring and altering brainwaves. And that's U.S. patent number 3951134A as in Adam. And this patent utilized scalar fields versus physical implants in order to facilitate the sensing and alteration of brainwaves at a position remote from a subject. And you don't think that the NSA doesn't have this little, and now by greatly improved, psychotronic warfare toy in its arsenal? I can assure you they do, and it's been deployed across the world. This is a case in point of how the general public is decades behind the surveillance technology deployment curve, and how the deep state utilizes this informative methodology to keep the extent of the technological development from the average citizen in order to further the agenda of full spectrum dominance and societal control under the tenets of fourth generation warfare. While the next technology I discuss with you very briefly has nothing to do with surveillance, it still explains or illuminates how technological advances are hidden from the general population. 2 or 3 years ago, so in 2016, the United States Navy made an announcement that it had developed laser technology which was able to disable boat motor. So if they were being attacked on the high seas, several miles away, they would be able to take down that boat with their recently developed laser system. Are you friggin' kidding me? Really? Are the masses so friggin' stupid that they're being spoon-fed this drivel and believing it? In the mid-1960s, they were banging space junk and satellites at 300 plus miles above the Earth from atolls Pacific Ocean with terrestrial-based laser systems. And that was, 35, 50, 60 years ago? And now the public is applauding for lasers that can take out boat motors from 2 miles away? You know, I can't wait for the horse and carriage to come out next year. Maybe we'll clap for that as well. Anyways, this is just a short observation about the surveillance technology deployment curve. When you are being monitored and tracked by certain types of technology, you're not going to have any idea that you're targeted. And unless you have a background in this type of technology or intelligence operations, most people, you know, they have a day of reckoning. They don't know what the hell's going on. In the late 70s, early 80s, the Air Force had already deployed fighters in which the pilots wore helmets which had transcranial thought reading capacity, or not thought reading, let's say electrochemical signature reading capacity, which allowed them to engage weapon systems and certain other aspects of the fighter's operation. Didn't have to be spoken. So this technology's been around for ages. The frequency-based technology that Malik spoke about or references in his 1974 patent, if that interests you, go back to Delgado. Type in or do a Google search for Delgado, Bullock Spearman's antenna remote control. Remember the remote control cars back in the 70s and the 80s with the whip antenna and that box? Well, they had farm animals hooked up to it in the 50s and 40s and released that information publicly. And let me assure you, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, they had humans hooked up to that same system as well. Germans were doing these frequency-based experiments in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. People, the surveillance technology deployment curve is way, way, way ahead of the population. And I think there's room to make another video or two about this, but one thing should resonate with you. It does with me. I'm not sure who the individual was or when it was. I believe it was at the end of the 90s. It was the head of Skunk Works for Lockheed Martin. On the day of his retirement, I think there was a select few hundred people in the crowd. He gave a speech. There was a big party. His last words, stepping off of the podium from his Skunk Works retirement party, were, "We now have the technology to take E.T. home." I believe this. We've had the wool pulled over our eyes. The level of technology available to the deep state and rogue members of federal agencies and the military, which spells disaster for the public, by the way. They have access to this technology. It's deployed. If you've always been a reasonable individual, and if now you are, for some reason, have a high level of scrutiny from the federal government, act. So if none of these things have really popped up in the past, and you're having some really unusual situations where it almost seems like science fiction or movie-like, and you're wondering if you're losing your bearing. You're not. You are being subjected to full spectrum dominance, fourth generation warfare, advanced technology, which is far, far, far ahead of what the public realizes even exists. Final note. Everyone always says Hollywood comes up with all the great ideas and then the government and DARPA and all these agencies follow them. That's incorrect. It's another, what is it, maybe Mockingbird situation. Hollywood is fed chunks of reality, or funneled chunks of reality, classified reality, through agencies in order to condition the public to accepting this type of reality. Not in all cases, but in many cases. This is Dr. X Key Score. I'm going to wrap up this video. There's certainly room to talk about this more. You can follow me at XKeyscore1 on Twitter. Thanks. Peace out, and I'll talk to you guys soon.